Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 911. It is a Wednesday night special. This is for Wednesday, the 5th of July. For those that have been with us forever, we typically record the show Monday nights, but this week, because of the odd timing of the 4th of July, we opted to go tonight, Wednesday nights. So this is our pre-show, by the way. For those that don't know, this is the magical part of the program where we do three things. We typically share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say outrageous things. So let's see here. I see Bill Murray wanting to get in, and we'll see who will be on the show tonight. Again, it's a little odd week. A lot of people had a 4-day weekend. But some people worked all the way through. And by the way, the big buzz as I'm doing this, and by the way, if you're looking for the show content, move the slider over about, let's see here, 9 minutes. We'll start at the top of the hour. So the big buzz is Threads is out. Hey, man, we're on Threads. Threads. This is the Zuckerberg's tweeter killer. We got to come up with a new nickname for Threads. We have the tweeter and the face bag and the talk and the gram. So what's Threads going to be? They released the app to the world. A lot of people obviously were beta testing this thing, but the public release happened about an hour ago. So everybody is on Threads and they're so excited. And I've already got 190 followers on Threads. Wow. But this is basically it piggybacks on Instagram. So when you open up Threads, it asks if you want to bring over your Instagram data, and you have to have an Instagram account. They are linked. You can't go Threads independently. You've got to have an Instagram account, apparently. But allegedly, this is going to kill off the tweeter. And I don't know if that's good or bad. We'll see. In fact, I tried to post. I posted one. The first one I posted here, it's called Yo, and that's it. I should leave it at that. Maybe just one post. That's enough. Yo. But I was going to post a picture just to see how it works. And every time I try and attach a picture, the app crashed on here. So don't know if that's a function of 10 gazillion people trying to, sign up all at the same time, but whatever. So for the social media dweebs, Threads, it's available. It's out there. And again, on Instagram, I'm Span WX. Some goober, got in there before me and got Span. And they've never posted, they just did it to aggravate me. So I'm Span WX. Quite frankly, on most platforms, I am. On the Twitter, I'm just Span. But on Instagram and YouTube and, TikTok and all the other ones, I'm Span WX. So we'll see how this plays out. But that's really all I need is another social media platform to worry about. It is a massive monster as it is. But and obviously what happened over the weekend, Musk did limited the number of tweets that you could view and post, and that created great weeping and gnashing of teeth within the social media, the tweeter community. And I will say I got frustrated because I'm trying to push out weather and I couldn't see anything. I can't see my own tweets. I can't see basically anything. So we'll see how this all plays out, but it will be a very interesting battle between the tweeter and Threads. Bill, are you on Threads?
No, but I'm going to be soon.
And it sounds like you're in the bathroom of an airport in the urinal somewhere. So the mic is the wrong one.
Yeah, it's not picking it up now.
Bill's got a fancy new set there. Looks like he's at World News Tonight with Bill Murray.
I think I'm good.
Yeah.
All right. How about the sound now, James?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, the cable on my Yeti is just a little bit finicky. I need to replace it.
Commissioner, how you doing?
I'm well.
Thanks.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm at my lake house in upstate New York, and I don't have great background unless I turn and show the lake. But sun's going down, so you get the roof.
You're all the background we need, Commissioner.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Thanks for coming on the show tonight. We owe you one.
Yes.
Hope you feel that way afterwards.
We hope you do too.
Yeah, I'm about to say it works both ways. This mightn't be a bad look for you, so we'll try and behave here.
It's Hannah I'm worried about.
No, she's going to prop the whole show up. It's going to be good. So
she should be on here. Podcast you'll do, Commissioner, where you're the second fiddle.
That's right. Yeah. So we were up there at Nantucket last week, and it was about 65 degrees in the middle of the day. It was just incredible. It was awesome. No humidity, no southern heat.
Yeah.
Good.
I came up Friday. So this is where my wife and I grew up, and we would come up here, rent a house. Our kids have been up here a bunch, and it's in the Finger Lakes region of central New York, which, Syracuse is not the prettiest place, but 30 miles west, it's actually quite nice. And I'll show you outside the window. So that's that's you're looking live. Yeah, that's
wow. That's just relaxing. That's
awesome.
Awesome.
So if you look, those kind of beige looking cliffs, you watch the sun go down, and those cliffs will change colors as it happens. And it just so happens on this lake, everything's built out except there's a nature preserve right across from us. So we were kind of knocking around looking for things, and 2018 found this place. So it's been really nice to have a few days. And it was beautiful today and yesterday. It rained all weekend. We came up Friday, and the Canadian smoke was pretty thick. In fact, Hannah was here, and was one of those indoors only days back in early June with her husband. And then I think there's a heat advisory tomorrow. So the most miserable place I've ever been when it's like 95 degrees is actually in central New York, because nothing's built for that.
That's true. Well, it's a beautiful place. We go to Red Sox games every year. They actually swept the Yankees when we were there.
That's not
we
good.
had. Oh, come on, Commish. I mean, you're a Yankees guy.
Yeah, when I was a kid, Syracuse used to have their farm team, so that was an early loyalty.
Well, I'll see if I can convert you, because we need you back on the light side here.
I appreciate the rivalry.
No, we were in Green Monster Row 1 for the Sunday night game of the Yankees series. A good friend of mine played for the Yankees, Mitch Moreland. Mitch played for Mississippi State, and he would play for the Texas Rangers for a long time. And
I remember him in Texas.
Yep. And the magical year was 2018. They had Mookie Betts and Andrew Benintendi, who played at Arkansas.
Right.
And of course, they Xander Bogaerts and Devers and Mitch played first base, and they had the pitching. And it was just the 2018 was pure magic. Hannah, can you hear us okay?
Hannah appears to be frozen.
I think she's frozen.
Now she's moving. Hannah, can you hear us?
I think she's working that 300 baud modem. I had one of those at one time.
I still do.
Jen, how you doing? And Greg, just so you'll know, we are live on YouTube now, and we'll go live on local television at the top of the hour at 8 Eastern. Most people listen to this as a podcast, but a lot of people do watch. So we are live. We like to disclose that so our guests won't be surprised. But we hit the local television at the top of the hour here, and that's when we can start the show. But Hannah, can you hear us okay?
Yes, apparently my internet is a little unstable, so we're going to work on that. Apologize for that, but I can hear everybody. Nice to see everyone.
Good to see you, Hannah.
Okay. Well, most of us here are unstable, so it all works out well.
We're good company.
Not just conditionally unstable, right, Jay?
Yeah. Hannah still hurt my feelings bad. My feelings are crushed.
Uh-oh.
Well,
Why
she
is this?
breaking.
Well, but I'm devastated. I mean, you interned at Brand X in 2014 and not here. So, I mean,
I wondered when that would come up.
It's
yeah,
true.
you know,
I thought it would take a few
I
more
was going
minutes.
to dance around that. I was not
Like
even
it's
bring
like
that
2
up.
minutes before the show starts, it already came up, Hannah. So
no. You know, we're getting it out of the way in the pre-show. So, and by the way, we're just hitting television now. It's the top of the hour. So, for those watching on the television side, we're doing a Wednesday night special.
okay, behave yourself, everybody. We're on TV now.
Yes, we're on TV right now. So, all right, so let's get this thing going here. Let's record track 1 and track 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains episode number 911. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for Wednesday, the 5th of July. It's a Wednesday night special. It's the 4th of July week, and a lot of folks were out and about, and so we thought we'd just wait and do a Wednesday night special. Troy, how about what are you munching on there? I notice you're eating dinner
Salad,
during the show
man.
here.
I don't normally do that. I'll usually have a little snack, but the last 24 hours have been very long. I had to work a EOC activation yesterday for 12 hours and for Willie Nelson's picnic actually here in Austin. And so it's just nothing stopped since yesterday morning. So finally slowing down a little bit, but the weather's behaved itself. And last night we had a good concert. Willie did a great job. And
How old is Willie now?
you know, I
Do we
think
know?
Willie 90 or 91, if I'm not mistaken. And I just put on a heck of a show from the Q2 Stadium stage last night, and we enjoyed it in the EOC. And I think we had in that stadium probably 15,000 people last night. So it was
Okay.
a good crowd, and the weather, like I said, behaved. And so Troy's happy, but he's a little behind. So
It's hey man, you just do whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
So Jen, are you on Threads yet?
I am not. I've heard about it. You're on there, aren't you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know me. I'm an early adopter. It was released to the world about an hour ago. Which and for those that don't know, this is Meta's Twitter killer.
yeah, they're calling it Twitter killer. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody, and you need an Instagram account, and it just kind of ports everything over from your Instagram account. So we'll see. We'll see. So you're not on Threads yet.
I am not. I did not do that over the past hour, but I may look.
You had
at
better
it.
things to do with your time, is what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
A few things.
Exactly
but
right, James.
I'll find out what you think, and then I'll go from there and see if it would be
We'll let
maybe
him
a
be the
tornado
guinea pig.
talk. Yeah, you'd be the guinea pig. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And again, we got, let's see, Dr. James Adelot from Tulsa, Oklahoma, from Fox 23 Action News. Dr. A, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Does Facebook Meta really need a Twitter killer, or will Twitter just kind of do itself in?
Doing
It
itself.
looked like suicide to me.
Commit suicide. Yeah. Way to go, Elon. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people want to talk about the tweeter meltdown this weekend, and we'll do that toward the end of the show if we have time here. But let's see. I know that we've got Dr. Neil Jacobs. He is traveling, trying to get out of Washington, D.C. tonight. He's on the road. Rick is 50-50. Kim said she might be late, but let's go over to Bill Murray and bring in our guest because I'm excited about the show tonight. Go, Bill.
Yeah, James, first shout out to my dear friend Catherine Poe Switzer at the SEC who made tonight's show possible. Tonight's guest weather brain is the Emmy Award winning weekend evening meteorologist at WDRB, Channel 41 in Louisville. You can catch her on the midday shows a few days a week also. She grew up in Alabama, got her degree from Mississippi State, interned in Birmingham, which we won't talk about, and worked in Fort Wayne before moving to Louisville. Hannah Strong, welcome to Weather Brains.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to be here. First time caller inner, but I've listened. I'm so excited to see you guys, see your faces, hang out for a little bit tonight.
I guess that's a good question to ask right there. Hannah, does your dad listen to Paul Feinbaum at all when he's driving around Birmingham?
You can ask him that. I'm not going to comment. See, we've practiced this before.
Well, Hannah, I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, and primarily because I was struck by the fabulous videos you put out for kids during the pandemic, during virtual
Thanks,
school. But
Bill.
we'll talk about that in a minute. But you have a pretty famous dad to a lot of us that love SEC, athletics and also college sports, of course. And it's probably the first time in my recollected memory, James Spann, in 911 shows, that we've had a father-daughter combo on the show tonight. So we welcome the father of our guest weather brain, a man who needs no introduction in the world of college sports. He's the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, Mr. Greg Sankey. Commissioner, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I find it fascinating. I'm on show 911. I'm not sure what that may mean for the rest of this.
I thought about that too when I was designing some questions to ask you. Our other most famous show was show 404. So if this one has anywhere near the notoriety of 911, it will be one for the record books for sure. Commissioner, it's probably the only podcast or radio show or television show you'll be on where you're playing second fiddle tonight, but we're certainly glad to have you here, and I know you don't mind.
No, I'm happy to be second fiddle to Hannah, proud of her work, and grateful that on midnight one time during our baseball tournament, she explained the science of fog to me.
Well, the SEC is certainly no stranger to interesting weather during competition, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But as I was referring to, Hannah, you were doing some really cool videos during COVID. Talk about how that came about for you, and just how that was rewarding. And then, Commissioner, I want you to take us back to that fateful day when we were waiting for the SEC basketball tournament to start in Nashville and the whole world fell apart. So Hannah, you go first.
Sure. Well, and it's going to be funny because we were together. Dad and I were in the same place at that basketball tournament. So I'm sure that'll be a funny story. The videos that I did during COVID, just kind of a pet project for me. So my sister actually is a teacher. She teaches elementary age kids. And during COVID, employment looked a little different. I was here in my house a lot, doing a lot of not television. I had a lot of free time to think about what I wanted to be doing with my time outside of the studio. And that was, how can we connect with people who are at home for the first time with kids, who need to fill some time with kids, in an engaging and exciting and informative way. So my sister and I talked a lot about what that looks like, how to interact with young kids and engage their minds. I think that's something that I enjoy about my job doing the weather, is just talking to people in a way that makes sense, translating these weather principles. Conditional instability was the joke in the beginning, talking about fog, midnight, in ways that just make sense to everybody. And so I started to look around the house for objects that would help me explain, like how hail grows. You pull out a hair dryer and a ping pong ball and you can do an updraft, right? It was winter, so we could go outside and collect snow and watch it melt and talk about the different liquid equivalent between rain and snow, just easy things like that. So I was filming it all on my iPhone in a stand in my house. And that project has since grown. So now it's become something that we do at work, a little bit of a franchise. We're adopting it on our streaming platform. There are talks about the Science Center wanting to be part of it here. So what started as just a brainchild that I thought was interesting, my sister and I got to do some work together, has ended up benefiting the station in some way, but also is a fun way for me to spend my time.
That's just fantastic. And those videos, we used them in our virtual Weather Ready Fest for the National Weather Association in 2020. And they were certainly a huge hit. We thank you for that. So, Commissioner, y'all were together that day in Nashville. I was out on my porch waiting for the world to fall apart and looking for a little escapism in some Alabama basketball, but that just came to a screeching halt.
It very much did. If you go back to the Wednesday, March 10th, 2020, we played 2 games that evening. We had made decisions around not letting fans in other than family members for Thursday's games, but we're still intent on playing. And I had made a decision that I needed to explain myself whenever we made key decisions. I was not going to do it via press release. We try to sync up a press release with visits on the SEC network or with ESPN, who was there, or press conferences, or all three. And as I went to the press conference on Wednesday night to explain myself, ourselves, and our decision-making, that's when, you may recall, the Utah Jazz, Oklahoma City Thunder had a game. Rudy Gobert tested positive, and then things just changed that night. So I don't think I saw Hannah much from that point.
No.
Until like Friday afternoon. And then I remember we sat around, I was just worn out Friday evening, watched 2 movies and ate pizza in our hotel room. Hannah, our mom and I, as we decided to take initially 3 weeks away because of the messaging around testing and, the protocols. And then by Tuesday next week, we were done for the spring.
Yeah, it just was a terrifying time, and we didn't know where we were going. We were in uncharted waters, and the SEC seemed to handle it pretty darn well. So kudos to you and the conference for, for making that work. What were the most terrifying and fascinating decisions during that horrible first 6 months, Commissioner?
One of the really effective decisions was not to put together a bunch of committees that could then argue among 5 people so we could argue among 14. We did put together a medical task force that we asked people to serve 60 to 90 days to help us figure out that summer and kind of return to activity. That group ended up being together for 2 full years as volunteers, doctors, athletic trainers. We had some immunologists, infectious disease specialists, all contributing. Met a biostatistician on Zoom back when we were still learning about Zooming. Stella Self, remember the conversation well, said, look, if you look back, this was in mid-April, 30 days, and think about all you didn't know, and then think forward 30 days, how much you'll learn. The longer you take to make major decisions, the better informed decisions you'll be able to make. And we wanted to continue on to try to play, and so that advice from Stella Self was incredibly important. And then, believe it or not, in early August, a podcast from Andy Stanley, who leads a church in north of Atlanta, on in times of uncertainty, what people need is clarity, to be continually clear through the month of August and September, what we were doing, being honest when I said I didn't know things. Like if you go back to March 10th and 11th, March 11th, when we stopped, I was taking notes of all of our decisions. I have a little notebook here that I carry around with me. Helps me think, helps me process. And at the end of all of our decisions, there's a note that I wrote, I need help. And what I had was really great help around me. And I forgot about that note immediately until the next year. I was tweeting about that decision-making come March of 2021. And I saw this little handwritten note that I need help, which was one of the best descriptions of my reality. And again, I had great help from our university leaders, from those who volunteered on a task force, patients, not all the time, but a lot of the time from our coaches, the willingness from our student athletes to try. I'll finish with this. Alante Taylor played at Tennessee, and in early July, we were on a video conference trying to answer questions. We couldn't answer every question, but he had a quote where he said, look, I'll be swabbed every day if I could play football on Saturday. And that became one of those North Star moments that, Mac Jones, who was on that leadership council, plays in the NFL, Alante and their colleagues were willing to try and really wanted the opportunity to play because, once the year goes by, it's not as if you just kind of re-rack everything and it's all the same. And we thought young people deserve the opportunity if they wanted it.
Well, thank you for your leadership during that terrible, terrible time, and thankfully we're mostly past that now. Now, I wanted to play sort of a father-daughter themed version of the old Newlywed Game with you two tonight. So,
great!
Here we go. And Greg, we're going to put you on the hot seat first. So your first question, you have to answer it, and then Hannah has to honestly tell us how good you do. Is Greg, what weather event most influenced Hannah's interest in the weather?
I have no idea. I remember
the best newlywed couple players.
Thanks for playing.
Her second semester at Mississippi State, she experimented with a couple of majors, went to the Career Resource Center. We'd had a conversation. It's really her story to tell. And it popped an interest. The first one was sport management. And she looked at me and said, I don't want to do what you do. Second was public relations. And she looked at me and said, what's that? And the third was meteorology. And it turns out to have a fantastic meteorology program. So she should probably take it from there. So I think I would look at it like that conversation, her interest in math and science. And by the way, I had no idea how much math and science meteorologists would go through in earning their undergraduate degree. It was pretty remarkable.
No question. So, Hannah, how good of a job did he did, and can you be more specific?
Actually, I think his response is totally fair because I'm not one of the meteorologists that got into this because of a weather event or that I've always known I wanted to do this. I got to college thinking I was going to be an engineer because of my love of math and science. And it was really boring, to be honest. No offense to any of the engineers watching or listening. That just was not for me. I clearly like to talk to people. So I went to the career center one day in tears, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? The sweet woman there printed out a list of every major at the university and said, don't worry about what transfers, don't worry about your credits, just circle things that sound interesting. And I went to Mississippi State. Broadcast meteorology is a specific major there. I circled it. A lot of my credits transferred. She said, I think this might be a good fit. Just try it. Take a class, see what you think. And the first class I took was essentially Meteorology 101 with the infamous Dr. Charles Wax, who was retiring that year.
Right.
So I got to meet Dr. Wax and learn from him, and the rest is history. I mean, I fell in love with the science of weather, the challenge of doing it on camera in front of a green screen where you can't see anything. It just fascinates me to no end. So there was not a weather event that inspired this. Weather has always been interesting to me because it affects our lives every day. But Dad's answer is actually correct, I think.
Right, I'm gonna cue James 8 a lot here, even though he doesn't want to be cued, but you got to say that, James.
No, I said I kind of wanted to be an engineer first, except I look silly leaning out of a train window with one of those little baggy.
Oh,
Actually,
boy.
engineering math probably
Okay.
did me in.
James is our comedian here, Hannah. So,
Yeah.
so
Apologies in advance.
sometimes.
Yeah, no, he tries to be. Now, I was an engineer. My first major was electrical engineering. I was an engineering major for 3 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of people follow that path, and they're a little
Commissioner about that.
intertwined.
I mean, I was 2 years.
So,
Physics.
Greg, you were
Physics,
pursuing engineering,
physics in
right?
laboratories. Yeah, so I had an engineering lab every Friday at 4 p.m. as a freshman. I don't know who does that as a freshman, and I didn't see the people part of the engineering, really, to Hannah's reference, and it took me a while to figure it out. I did not know about career centers, so part of my learning experience helped me direct her when it was time for her moment of what do I do with my life.
Well, Hannah, that's a great and inspiring story for a lot of college students who probably don't know what they want to do freshman, sophomore years, and that's very inspiring. So that obviously is a very gifted person at MSU that helped you in that way.
I wish I could remember her name. And for the record, all the credit to Dad on that one. Like it's such a blessing to grow up with people in your life and even like role models who will say you don't have to have it all figured out today. Especially to an 18-year-old. Like we want you to have your whole life planned when you go to college and know exactly what you're going to do. That's a lot of pressure to put on kids. And I'm so grateful my parents didn't feel that way. And the people that I came in contact with Mississippi State didn't feel that way. They helped me figure out what was going to be good and right for me. And here we are. It worked out okay, I think.
That is just fantastic. Now, of course, you graduated, about 2011, Hannah? Not trying to date you
15.
here, but 15. Okay. But
Yep.
Did you experience the 2011 tornado outbreak in Alabama? Did it have any influence on you at all?
So I was a senior in high school in April of 2011. And I'll be honest, I don't remember a whole lot about it. I remember we didn't have school. I actually played on the softball team at my high school. And so I remember practice being canceled, and that was the biggest impact this had on me. I wonder in hindsight if it was something that I sort of blocked from my memory. I don't have much of a recollection of the day. I did a lot of volunteer work in years after, cleaning up, especially around Tuscaloosa. Obviously, growing up in Birmingham and then transitioning to Starkville, Tuscaloosa is right there in between. And so we did a lot of projects going over there and seeing what's indescribable, truly. But I don't remember much about that day, to be honest.
So
Hey, Hannah, where'd you go to high school out of curiosity?
I went to Briarwood.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
They got a great softball program there.
Well, thank you so much. I was not part of the greatness, but it was so much fun. I loved playing sports through high school.
All right, Greg, here's your second chance, your second at bat. What's Hannah's favorite weather phenomenon, Commissioner?
Oh,
Are you sure you
Wow.
two know each other?
Yeah. Well, she's educated me on terms that are like in the media, but aren't really terms. So I would say RainCon, and she'll laugh about that.
Oh my
Like,
gosh. I can't
there's
believe you would say
Torcon,
that to
right?
these people. That's so
There's-
embarrassing, Dad.
There's Torcon.
That's
right?
why you're
So
here. Yeah.
I'm like,
That's right.
when it's raining, I'll send her a text that, hey, RainCon here is 10. We have all these. I don't know, that's a really good question. I've watched her around tornadic activity. I would say severe stuff, since the Ohio River Valley seems to have the most interesting set of severe weather realities that I've encountered. So I'll go with the severe weather activity.
All right. How does that answer sound to you, Hannah?
Yep, that's right. I tell people that tornadoes are my favorite as long as nobody gets hurt, or worse, certainly. But I think that tornadoes are the day that my job matters and where I can be most helpful to people, because that's scary and it's complicated to understand what's going on and what could change. And so I would say, yeah, tornadoes and severe weather.
So Hannah, you won Emmys for your coverage of the Kentucky tornadoes a couple of Decembers ago. Talk about that night, how that night affected you and as a broadcaster.
Sure. So there were, a lot of things happening that night. So that's the night of the Mayfield tornado in Kentucky. That's just kind of the moniker it got. Certainly affected other communities. And that's not in my coverage area. That's in the Paducah coverage area. Doesn't actually get to us, but that same storm came to my coverage area. Our chief meteorologist was away. He was on vacation that week. So I hope to be a chief someday. That's my aspiration. And so what my team has been so great about is that when our chief is gone, the rest of the guys kind of allow me to step in and lead and make some decisions. And I'm so grateful for that. That's part of why I've stayed here so long. And that was the case leading up to December 10th and 11th. I was sort of leading the team at that point. We were making staffing decisions. We knew this was going to be a big day somewhere nearby, if not necessarily inside of our communities. And so we had staff leading up to that. One of our Mets got sick leading up to that. And so then you're down 2 people on a 5-person team. It looks a little different. So we were kind of scrambling, trying to figure out, what does this look like? So I worked the evening shift that night. The storms started to pop up and obviously got pretty destructive really quickly coming out of Arkansas and then into Kentucky. And by the time the tornado really started to develop around Mayfield, the whole team was in. We were all watching it together and photos started to come in of the destruction. I specifically remember the courthouse. When that photo came in, that was the first real destruction we had seen from that tornado. And you guys, that just, like, your stomach drops. And now it's a little bit of a different thing that we're doing. Like, to watch it on radar is one thing, and we all know what this means and what this translates to. And then when you start to see the pictures of what it's already done and the fact that it's still this strong and it's still doing this to people's lives, that's a whole different thing. And I think at the time it was the strongest tornado I had covered in my career on live television. So then we're tracking that storm moving into our counties. And also there are several other tornadoes developing at the same time. So it was like one of the longest days I've ever worked, one of the hardest and one of the most rewarding. People are watching you during the scariest moment of their lives, the worst moment of many of their lives, a moment where their lives are changing forever. I don't take that lightly. And there's one of those moments, like everybody has one of those moments.
Hannah, I have a question for you real quick. That, if I'm
Sure.
not mistaken, and it wouldn't be the first time I was, but Hannah, that was a Friday night, right? That was a Friday.
It was. Yep.
And did that make any difference? I know going into that event, it was pretty well advertised, in the days in advance. We talked to some of the folks that are a little closer where the track was, but I always worry about those events on Friday night and Saturday night when the traditional TV audience may not always be there. But did that
And Christmas parties? That was prime weekend for Christmas
you're
parties.
exactly right. Early December, tornado season. What the heck's with all about? But just wondered
Right.
if that Friday night made a difference in your mind at all.
Well, and especially around here, the note about December tornadoes, like in Birmingham, we get December tornadoes. It's something folks are a little bit more aware of. In Kentucky, it doesn't happen as much. At least it didn't at the time. And so that was really the biggest hurdle, was folks just not understanding that this is even a possibility. I do think it was really well advertised so that by Friday, people knew they needed to at least check in with the newscast or with, a trusted meteorologist or something. We had a lot of folks telling us, I knew it was coming, so I knew I needed to check in at some point. And then the time of night in my area in particular really became a liability too, because by then it's the middle of the night and folks had gone to bed because the storm never came. So we had a few tornadoes here that were not that same intensity that really did catch a few people off guard, which is terrible to see.
I got a question for you. I assume you saw, and I always love to get people's response to this, that first special weather statement that came out of the National Weather Service in Paducah that night when the tornado was actually, I believe, and still in northeastern Arkansas or moving across the Tennessee River. And a special weather statement, an SPS. I'm wondering, when you saw that, did that really grab? Because I mean, I didn't see it in real time, but I looked at that after the fact, and I think sent shivers up my spine that I realized that a weather service is seeing this outside their county warning area, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I equated it in the moment to when we get discussions from the National Hurricane Center that use that elite language. That's the same. I had the same reaction to their statement that I did to those hurricane messages. And I'll tell you, the folks at the Paducah office are top notch. And Pat Spoden used to lead that office and has since retired. And he was there that night and is a good friend. And, you know, Louisville is what covers my metro, the Louisville Weather Service office. But we always keep the Paducah Weather Service chat open as well, because their weather obviously leads into ours. So we were watching their stuff all day. And yeah, when that comes in, it just hits different. You know, this is just a different event than today. You know, I had a couple of severe warnings today at work. It's not the same thing when you get statements like that.
Hey, Hannah, James in Tulsa again. Thank you for being on here, and your father as well for being on here. What you touched about with your chief out of town, that's pretty much nightmare fuel for us as chiefs, because we try really hard not to schedule vacations during what is typical severe weather season. Like, I'm pretty much blacked out from March 15th to June 15th. And then, you know, you think a December vacation is perfectly safe. But to get to my main question is, what leadership lessons are you learning, and did you learn in this? And what leadership lessons did you pick up from your father that you think are going to make you an excellent chief?
There is not enough time in the world to go through those, to be honest. Like, I look to my dad as one of the leaders in the country right now that really has a pulse on what's going on. I mean, I'll come back to it in a moment, but there's not enough time in our discussion tonight for all the things I've learned from my dad. To your
never
point
buy
about
a
chiefs,
rental car. That's the first lesson she was
Or an
taught.
old
Never
police
buy a
car,
rental
right?
Show title. Show title.
I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that. He's not making that one up.
Well, I mean, you'll be in an unusual position as a chief meteorologist, since that's your career aspiration, because you will have bosses, and then you will sort of be a supervisor for your weather team. How do you envision that's going to work for you?
An excellent question. I think part of what I learned that night and through kind of the decisions leading into that, the week leading up to it, to get to your original question, is just the importance of a team. So the team that I've been working on here has been together the core of us have been together now for 6 years. We've added a weekend person since then. And that's so rare in this business. We're treated really well here. We work really well here, but the trust we have on this team, man, it's invaluable. And on a night like that, where you know the Mets around you are skilled and they know their stuff, and you also know that they're going to be there to pick you up. I mean, I had been doing live television for 8 hours and my brain needed a break. And so I knew I had full confidence that I can step away for 10 minutes and sit down and figure out what's going on, and that they don't need me because they can handle this. They're all very smart, very capable meteorologists, and this is how our team works. So I think one of the important lessons is just building a team on purpose. And that's a luxury. We don't always get that luxury in this industry. But if you can craft a team of people whose strengths play off of each other and whose weaknesses will cover each other, that's the dream. Like, that's the secret sauce. And I really feel like our chief, Mark, has done that here, has been able to do that. And I also think that's something I've picked up from my dad along the way, is like, you don't just throw people into the mix and hope it works out. There's got to be some intentionality in how you are structuring a team, and also how you're helping your people build skills. We can't all be good at the same thing, because well, then the other things are going to get left in the dust and you lose. Like, that's a huge weakness. So I think that was one of the big lessons I learned, is just the importance of that behind the scenes work, of building a team, thinking intentionally about that. And to your kind of second question about what does that look like in the future, that's the big question. I think each team is different though. And so to become a chief someday, you've just got to learn your team, what strengths and weaknesses lie there and how you can build into those, how you can help them grow together and grow differently. I just really think there's a big emphasis in my life on the people on the team and not just kind of the work everybody's doing.
Yeah, and I think just to have a misplaced football analogy in that, you get to watch head coaches, and the really good head coaches seem to know how to communicate to each player. And you'll see them grab a face mask and pull somebody forward. Maybe not so much of that anymore, but they'll get in people's faces. Others get an arm around the shoulder, others get a pat on the back or the backside. So, I mean, you know their language.
Right. Well, that's something that my dad and I have talked about before. You guys have to understand he's a prolific reader, which is something I've picked up from him, reading all kinds of books about everything, but particularly about leadership. And so I have no idea who to credit this to. He'll probably remember. But there's a statement about you've got to get the right people on the bus to draw. Like, if you're trying to go a direction, if you're trying to do a thing in life, you've got to get the right people on the bus. And I think that's foundational. Most of us would understand that. But then the next step is you've got to have the right people on the right bus, and they've got to be in the right seat. Because if you just like put everybody on and hope it works out okay, well, who's driving? Who's navigating? What's everybody's role? That's not super helpful. But when you get people in the right seat, you take a minute to establish, what are your strengths? What are you passionate about? What do you want to be doing with your time and with your life? That's how you can really maximize not just what those people bring to the table, but then what they're going to do in the world. It goes both ways.
And I want to take a second to introduce Dr. Kim Cloko-McLean. Kim, welcome to the show. Meet Hannah Strong and her father, who's the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, which affects you in Oklahoma too. We were commenting earlier tonight, Kim, that we this is probably our first father-daughter combo on the show. And James A pointed out we have a mother-daughter combo every week, and we just missed seeing Zoe tonight. So I see you got all the kids to bed and got here with us, and we're glad you joined us.
Guys, I at least got the baby to bed. So sorry if there's not a Zoe appearance this evening, but there's all the weeks to come, and it's really nice to meet you both. Thank you for joining us on WeatherBrains, and sorry to have been a little bit late, missed out on the first half hour, but I'm sure there's a whole lot of great stuff to come here.
We're going till midnight, so it's gonna be a long one tonight, Kim.
We are.
Greg, take us back to March 14th, 2008, and the SEC basketball tournament in Atlanta. And that experience, I was watching from Dallas, and of course, knowing what was going on in the weather, could see the storm coming toward Atlanta and wondering what was going to happen. Tell us something from that night that will amaze us.
So I was in a very different role. I was an associate commissioner, and Hannah was back in Birmingham with her mom. I think they were coming over the next day. It was actually at a movie when the tornado hit the Georgia Dome. Her sister was with me, Mariah, who's 3 years younger. And we were sitting kind of at the end of the court, watched the staff member from the Georgia Dome, Ken Jefferson, moved very rapidly. And when we'd had storms in the Georgia Dome, and it was a fabric roof, and so you would hear the noise, nothing abnormal with that. And so you heard the storm noise, and Ken went to Craig Maddox, who was on our staff at the time, and about 10 seconds later, things started to move in the roof. The noise changed, and there had been somebody who escaped from the county jail. I don't know if it was that year, or the day before, or the year before, and you heard helicopters all over. So it wasn't like you didn't hear noise during these things. And then you watch, there was a video board to our right moving. Everything just kind of stopped for a moment as the roof moved. And then it's like, well, now what? And I was watching. And so Mariah and I quickly exited our seats. Wesley Person, by the way, was sitting in front of us. He was being honored that weekend, the legend from Auburn. We got up to leave, and we were stopped because the video board hanging from the roof, not the center hung board, the scoreboard, which is kind of one of side video boards was still moving. And then we went back in to a meeting room, stayed up all night. What people don't recall is the next day I had my tire had been slashed in the parking garage. I had to go have a tire replaced between games. So we played the Mississippi State and Alabama game, finished that evening, and then we had time to figure out that there had been structural damage. We weren't going to be able to continue. So the next morning, we played a game early, Georgia, and you'll forgive me for who they played. May have been Kentucky in that first game. Georgia won. I leave. I go to have my tire changed, and there's another tornado warning heading right at Georgia Tech's arena. So everybody in the arena, which was a much smaller crowd, ended up having to be relocated underneath the stands to a safer area. And one of my most vivid memories was about 1 o'clock talking to the Georgia Tech staff member, and the Georgia Tech folks were so awesome that weekend. But the staff member who had the keys to the building, and he says, well, I'm going to be away from the phone for about 30 minutes. I'm going to ride my motorcycle. And I'm like, you do realize there are still storms out there. And he got in there about 1:32 in the morning, and we played. But the moment that I saw Ken Jefferson move, that was abnormal. And then the roof moved, and it wasn't 10 or 15 seconds because it wasn't predicted to produce a tornadic event out of that part of the storm. And you think downtown, naively, you think downtown, it won't happen here. And then it happened and things moved. And the other part is there was another warning because there was a tornado tracking towards downtown again the next day.
And Kim Cloco McLean has to give the obligatory WeatherBrains PSA there about tornadoes hitting downtowns. Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't believe that can happen, but it can and does. There have been a lot of cities that have been hit even just in recent years, and you're recounting one of those experiences that, was certainly jarring for that area. I mean, just looking just at the outbreak that we had in April 2011. The major metropolitan areas that were all hit just in that one day. And a few years before, Atlanta had been hit downtown, and we've had Nashville hit. And I mean, it just Memphis, it goes on and on. So yeah. Oh, and then the chat, only Norman is safe from tornadoes. That's right. That's right. This is the most tornado safe place in the whole world, of course.
Well, James Mann, the Alabama broadcasters roped you into that night, didn't they, remotely?
Well, here's the deal. Our son and Hannah, our son went to Spain Park. Okay, so Spain Park and Briarwood, they were rivals, and he played baseball at Spain Park. But anyway, I had been out at Hoover East, just throwing in some batting practice. We went out there in the cages for an hour, my dinner break, and I came back. And the minute I walked in the door, I got a call from Tom Stipe. Tom is the producer of the University of Alabama Sports Networks, and he's an old friend. He was in my wedding, and he said, I think there's a tornado or something here, but nobody's saying anything. They knew absolutely nothing. And he said, would you go on the air with us? And I wound up doing 30 minutes of wall-to-wall weather on the University of Alabama Basketball Network. But let me just say this, Greg, and listen, I want to say I called Robbie Robertson. Robbie serves on a board with me, and he's a good friend. And I said, well, you need to talk with Mike Slive in that, this needs to be part of a process to make it better. And let me just say the Southeastern Conference, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the show. I've said this many times publicly. They have gone from worst to first when it comes to handling weather situations. What the SEC does right now, every conference in this nation should study it because it's good. It's where it needs to be. So I want to say congratulations for coming such a long way from 08 to where we are today.
There are a couple of things that I've forgotten. The week before our men's tournament in 2008, we had about a 12-inch snow event in Nashville for our women's tournament. And tornadoes are the drama, but if you're in Nashville, it's happened to us in Little Rock and St. Louis, and you have snow during an SEC basketball tournament, you've got some issues to work through on team movement and what do you do with fans. We had another tornado warning at our women's tournament. It was just a few years later, and when you have, I think we had probably 10,000 people at Bridgestone, there's only so much you can do, but we could see it was coming our way. In fact, it was one of those days where the Weather Channel sends Jim Cantori to like Nashville. So, there's going to be a problem. So our alert level was very high. And we had about a 45 or 50-minute halftime. We've had to do that a couple of times just to keep people in safe areas. Don't depart because you're concerned. Baseball. James will know Brian Roberts helps us on site a lot. Hannah is a backup. She's introduced me to products. I've learned they're called not tools, not resources, products that our staff has access to. People
Hannah.
complain about our lightning policy, but Hannah's explained to me the 8-mile radius and why that's scientifically established. And you know what? It doesn't mean that every time we stop a game for 30 minutes, there's going to be a lightning strike or a storm, but the potential's there. And then the fog, which happened literally at the Hoover Met on a Friday night at midnight in the top of the ninth with 2 outs, and standing there on the phone, like texting, saying, "Hey, are you awake?" And again, we have people that have been there, but you're not going to stay till midnight on a Friday. I'm like, explain to me what happens when fog settles in these atmospheric conditions. And
I think that was the funniest part of that story, though.
We still talk about that every year. It was Florida and LSU, this year's national champion competitors. LSU was up big, and I mean, you couldn't see at that point.
And a lot of people don't know this. There is a river behind the Hoover Met back there, the Cahaba River.
Yeah.
And that comes into play. But yeah, that was, we used to live in that neighborhood. We lived in Park Trace, which is right there by that. So it's happened before and it's going to happen again. But let me say one more thing. And I know Troy wants to say something, but this is how far we've come. This is how old I am. Okay. So I was doing television in 1983. And I'd been on television in Birmingham for years, but we had the Alabama-Auburn game at Legion Field in Birmingham. Okay. And Bill Murray, you know this story very well.
Oh, yeah.
And so we had a tornado warning for Jefferson County, the city of Birmingham. Back in those days, we had no velocity. We had a hook echo, strong indication of a tornado, and a rotating thunderstorm that was easily capable of producing a tornado was approaching Legion Field. And I think Bill, what was the capacity back then? 80, 90,000?
Probably 82 or 84,000, maybe, I think.
Yeah. They never stopped the game. They never stopped the game. And forget the tornado. You had lightning popping everywhere. Keith Jackson said it was the worst thing he's ever seen in his life. And that same parent storm did drop a tornado east of Birmingham that killed 2 people in Oxford. And that could have been an absolute disaster. So I just wanted to share it with people. This is how far we've come from that to now. We've got the 8-mile rule in effect, and it's just so good. So again, hats off to you, Greg, and Hannah for putting this stuff together. It's very good.
Well, before you say anything, Troy, I wanted to say too, I was at the 1994 Alabama Ole Miss game, which was played in a terrible thunderstorm, and an Ole Miss assistant coach actually got hit by the current coming through his headset on the sideline while we were playing the game.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been feeling exposed as sitting in the upper deck at Alabama during a severe thunderstorm, that is no fun.
Well, Bill, what I want to say to the commissioner, I've never had the honor to talk to our commissioner, but and I say ours because being here in Austin, Texas Aggies commissioner of mine. I graduated from Texas A&M, and I've worked with Coach Jimbo Fisher and the Aggie football program a little bit with their weather support for over, I guess, the last 25 years. And now
I've been there to admire your work a couple of times.
Well, I appreciate that. There are many people in emergency management at Texas A&M, but I'm also involved in this is what I want. This is what I want to tell you, Commissioner, because here at the University of Texas, where I've been teaching for 36 years, I serve in emergency management, which is in campus security. UTPD, basically, we work under their direction. And this year, we just came off our emergency managers meeting at the SEC. They recently held that meeting, I guess, I forget where it was. But I'm going to tell you, Commissioner, that what our emergency management folks told us is how impressed I'm going with what James has said here, how they are so impressed with the SEC and your planning and emergency management planning and all that. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity working with you. I know Kevin Claisel at OU. Same thing. Kevin and I work real closely together in lightning stuff. And so again, tip of the hat to the SEC. From what I'm hearing, our emergency management people are telling us that at University of Texas in planning meetings. And I can tell you from behalf of Texas A&M, I hear great things as well.
That's a tribute. Hannah, I should have done this last night because I was making a hiring decision about adding some people to our team today. And really we've had folks added to our team who have been charged with things or brought expertise in and have followed through. And that is a 2-day meeting. It was up in Fayetteville, Arkansas earlier in June, where we bring together a lot of people, and it doesn't happen without the support from our athletics directors on campus to send people, and then our university security and emergency management people when they get together. And it's an enormous commitment, but it provides relationships, a base level understanding. The hard part for me is dealing with hurricanes. We can talk about that. That's just a reality that we uniquely face. But for every other element, the ability to know people and have communication is an incredible asset we've worked to create.
James, I'm going to put you on the spot because I have a related question to what you were going to say there.
No, I just posted the link in chat. I think this is the telecast of that 1998 game with Keith Jackson just discussing the downpour and severe weather. And it's hilarious now that we look back on it 25 years later. Not so funny at the time.
In fact, I'm going to make that my pick. If you're talking about the 83 Iron Bowl, that's going to be my pick of the week, is to go back and watch that. It's just fascinating. We can laugh now, but it sure. And I was doing weather on the NBC channel here. I was wall to wall. Not a soul was watching me because the world was watching that game on ABC Channel 6. And, back those days, that was it. You watched pretty much over-the-air television. And so not a soul was watching me. And they didn't have the nerve to break in, and I don't blame them. That they did put a little tornado warning bug up in the screen. So at least we had that.
Do you remember, James? Do you remember at Texas A&M back in the late 80s, the Hurricane Bowl when the
Bill
Hurricane,
Curry, Bill Curry.
Remember they went live in the stadium and the storm was not there. I mean, it was.
Well, he was just buying time to get some injured folks back on the field, Troy, because we came out there and cleaned y'all's clock in December, and that might not have happened.
Let's move on from that. Okay, yeah.
You gonna let him get away with that?
And nope, I'll get him back.
Well, I'm sure. Hannah, this question is coming to you, but I'm going to start with something Commissioner Sankey did in May at our National Tourism Week talk here in Birmingham. Commissioner, you told a story when you first got to the SEC about asking for feedback. Talk about that and how that surprised you. And then, Hannah, I want you to follow up on this word that he's going to use about how we avoid that as meteorologists.
Yeah, it was actually the search process. So I joined the SEC staff in 2002 as an associate commissioner, and Hannah was in 4th grade when we moved in November of 2002. And then during the search process for the commissioner, when Mike Slive had retired, the search firm interviewed our presidents and chancellors, faculty, athletic representatives, athletics directors, senior women administrators, and our staff. And from our campuses, what I learned after I was hired, because I wanted to see the survey information, was the word complacency kept showing up in points of feedback. And we were doing really well, won a bunch of national championships. And I shared the story of my first full staff meeting when I was commissioner, saying, here's what our membership has said about us in our office, that we've become complacent. And it took the air out of the room. And you'll hear from coaches, particularly successful coaches, about the need to not become complacent, to constantly fight complacency. And that's, I'm away from Birmingham right now. I do a lot of reading and thinking and planning over these couple of weeks. And how do we continue to push forward to not think that, I think we won 8 national championships this year. We've won 4 straight in baseball, 3 straight in football, 2 straight in women's basketball, a bunch of track and field. And how do we continually understand that that's not enough? And it's probably different for me than it is in a meteorology situation where every day you're going to produce graphics and a forecast, and fighting complacency is a challenge for all of us, whether it's competitive sports on a team, a conference office, or the work that you all engage in on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think I can connect a couple of dots here, because we're having this conversation about all of us have at least one story about being at an outdoor sporting event and the weather hits us in some way. It affects the game in some way, or it was impactful. Obviously, because of the connection to my dad, weather and sports and that nexus is super important to me. And there's so much complacency around live sport and dangerous weather. How do we stop that? But to take that to my day job, what I'm actually responsible for, there are a lot of ways my dad and I are really similar. A lot of ways we're different, but this is the one that complacency. I don't want to speak for him, but complacency is a bad word to me. Like, I'm constantly pushing the envelope. You hear me saying I work weekends, and yet I aspire to be a chief, and I'm on a team that lets me be part of leadership and make decisions. We're constantly pushing the envelope. We use augmented reality at my station, those like really cool 3D graphics. And I didn't realize how unusual that was until I went for a couple of rounds of interviews last year. And we use it every day in almost every hit that we do on television. And that seems to be unusual. So we're constantly pushing the envelope. But with weather in particular, we all know this. The science changes so fast. We've learned so much about weather in the last 30 years, the last 50 years, that complacency becomes dangerous. It's not just inconvenient or boring. It can be dangerous to not be constantly evaluating, reevaluating, looking back through data, conducting new research, all the things. So complacency in weather and in our day jobs, sure, can just be a little frustrating sometimes, but more than that, when we're thinking about these big days, when we're thinking about tornado research, James describes what tornadoes used to look like on radar and how we view that differently now. The complacency of, well, we can kind of see it from a hook echo. Can you imagine? And we don't have dual pole data. What would the weather look like? I mean, what would the universe look like now? I don't know. I have lots of thoughts about complacency.
Yeah, it's a bad thing for sure, and especially with the way communication is changing, and that seems to be a key of your emphasis is on how to communicate the information. That's the critical part. As James A. and other folks have said over and over, the forecast can be good, but if you can't communicate it, it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
Yeah, well, and if you're not communicating it in a way that people can receive it, that's one of the biggest challenges right now. We started the conversation tonight with a discussion of this new Threads thing that Meta has launched. I mean, the constantly evolving landscape of social media, just digital media in general, is really challenging right now, because you're right. No matter how right I am about the Mayfield tornado or about tomorrow's storm forecast, if it's not reaching people, I've not done my job today, and it's not helpful. And I don't know where that line is between, are you on all the platforms doing all the things 24/7 like James Spann does? I don't know how you survive, sir. Seriously.
I've not slept since 1973.
He has.
But no. I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do. I will never complain about it. And I think people that do this, like you do it because it's a calling. And the long hours, the lack of sleep, it doesn't matter. You are doing what you love to do. It's a calling, and I'm honored to do it. And so no, I will never complain. And that's the one thing I will say about being around some of these folks in the league, Greg. I obviously am involved with the University of Alabama pretty heavily, and some of those coaches will drive you to excellence. And I love that. And like Hannah says, I cannot stand mediocrity. I can't stand it. I mean, it is my goal for perfection. And the old saying from Vince Lombardi, you will never achieve perfection, but on the journey, you will achieve excellence. And that's what I just love to do. And I feel better at this age than I felt when I was 20. And I don't need sleep. It's an absolute treat to do this every day. So, yeah.
But James, don't we to same degree, Hannah, and even Commissioner, we still have this thing though where we deal with people who say it won't happen to me. And by the way, they may say that at home, Hannah, or when we're on television, or commissioner, they may say it in the football stadium when that first message pops up and says thunderstorms are possible this afternoon. We'll keep you advised and things like that. But we still run that problem. And Kim is our social scientist, where we have to convince some people that, yes, it can happen to you. I mean, we cannot afford in this day and age to not be proactive. We cannot ill afford to be reactive, right?
Absolutely. Well, and something that I'm learning more about as my career progresses that I would love to get Kim's thoughts on too is just the amount of personal responsibility involved for the consumer of the information. Because we just had this great discussion of, if my forecast isn't reaching people, if the alert message, if the warning, if whatever the thing is not reaching the people, is it helpful? No. But I can't make the choice for you. Right. You have to make a choice. You have to internalize that information and make a decision with that information. I can help talk you through what good decisions would look like based on the information, but I can't do it for you. Well, and so how do we talk to people about?
James from Oklahoma is just mentioned, and Kevin Clazel's big with this. I've stolen it from him. And Commissioner, you can nod and go along with me, but as Kevin says, hope is not a plan. And, you sit around and hope all day, and that just buys you print in the old newspaper above the fold the next day, if you don't plan ahead.
It's so interesting, this conversation, and I'm curious to know, our guests, what your thoughts are on this intersection of sports and weather. Part of the interesting challenge, Hannah, when you're talking about people living in these new social media platforms and communications getting so just bifurcated and everyone's everywhere. One of the places that they're inhabiting less and less is actually the outside. And it seems like sports, for a lot of people, when they go to a sporting event, that might be either more of an exposure to the outside than they typically have, or at least getting themselves into a structure that they know less about and maybe is more vulnerable to severe weather hazards. And in that context, in the social sciences, we say they're situationally vulnerable, where maybe typically they are well adapted to, dealing with stuff at home. But this is a whole other ballgame, no pun intended. And so I'm really interested, there's two parts to this equation. One part is the weather and like giving them the forecast information. And I'm curious on the other part is in your facility, helping people to understand if there is bad weather, what to do about it, that there are places to go, that they are in a building that it might look huge. You're in this huge dome structure sometimes. It might look great, but yeah, the roof can pop off. This is what we learn about in graduate dynamics, Bernoulli, air flows across the thing and it goes low pressure. It's bad. So yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. And so I'm curious about that nexus of actually the two of you, where the weather forecast information can meet the local safety information. What has the SEC been doing to try to think about connecting those dots so that people can make a successful choice?
Troy asked me about our gathering of our really event management leaders, which will include emergency management, our chiefs of police, our campuses. Some actually have meteorology schools embedded within their campuses or direct relationships with meteorologists. I guess all of you in the business call them Mets, but I'll be more respectful since nobody laughed at my RainCon joke. With the level I know.
We were laughing.
So that they all have these relationships, and what's interesting is kind of day of game, the amount that happens that nobody knows about, the amount of people that are behind the scenes monitoring, acting, reacting, being attentive. And that includes, event security that we would traditionally know, crowd management, concession flow and food availability or beverage availability, weather. But that's not just that day. And then in the fall for football, I think probably more of our interaction between Hannah and myself will be around hurricanes, and the National Hurricane Center website goes dormant with me, early November, you hope, and is active right now. We don't have any events, but you're hoping that there'll be a bunch of things to take all the energy out. That's my personal theory that Hannah laughs about. And then, I've joked with my Pac-12 colleague that an earthquake, there's not 5 days of like lead up on the Weather Channel that there's going to be an earthquake, and it happens and you deal with it. The build up around a hurricane is really challenging. And this goes, I think, Kim, beyond your question about kind of in the event and in the moment, but people react very differently post Katrina. And then the more we go through things where it's predicted to be a certain way and it's not, you saw in Florida last year, the destruction that can come suddenly from these storms. And so how do we balance trying to play a season, move games, be respectful of teams and their families around these weather events? And we have an athletics directors meeting in August where we will work through our procedures, because that's really the basis for how they function in the moment. I'm also noticing the sun's gone down, which was my lighting, so I have to go turn some lights on.
So yeah, you go for it.
You didn't explain that to him, Hannah? I mean, really.
I got a ring light turned on back here. I don't know what his issue is. He's usually very well set up with lighting and books.
Look at there, man. He got it going.
Tablet.
He's not in his normal habitat.
I'm not.
I gotta say though, I love the camera following you. That is
I don't know how to
highest
make
tech
that
thing we've
stop.
ever had for a guest on the show.
It's an iPad. It's an
Universal
iPad.
cameraman over there.
Yeah, really.
Well, so I
Okay,
think
you need to bring that up, because I was going to bring that up about Berkeley.
Yeah, they spent a vast amount of money retrofitting their stadium. The Hayward Fault, I think it's the Hayward Fault, runs under one of the end zones at that stadium. And I think it's been a few years since I read this. A big part of the stadium is resting on big seismic dampers. It was a fascinating piece of engineering.
No, I think that's absolutely the case, as I try to plug in my light here. So completely poor planning by me.
speaking of sophisticated pieces of engineering.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to work.
This is why I needed to get out of that lab on Friday afternoon that we talked about.
All right, Hannah, here's your newlywed game question for your father. What's the commissioner's go-to snack during game day?
Oh, go-to snack during game day. I don't know. We didn't
He's
hate
usually
like
working probably most game
Yeah.
days, but if it's not SEC, what is it?
okay, I have several contenders. Popcorn, because he loves popcorn. Nachos, because if you followed him on Twitter from the OG days, he would
That was
tweet.
high school. That was
That
your
was high school
there.
football. Yes.
Yeah, high
He would go
school.
to high school football games and tweet about the quality of nachos at Birmingham local high schools, which was peak Greg Sankey Twitter.
Wow.
That sounds like retweet material there, Dr. Spooner.
That was early on when I had like
It's a long time
800
ago.
followers, not 52,000.
Or when we would travel to games, so sometimes I would get to ride with him on weekends. We would go to games, especially when I was in high school. The road trips always consisted of beef jerky and Pepsi snacks to keep him awake on the drives back home. So those are my three contenders.
Slim Jims. So yeah, I have to stay away from Slim Jims. I don't know what's in them, but I just don't even approach them. Yeah, and popcorn. Popcorn at a game. I have a problem with popcorn, actually.
All right, Hannah, when he's not watching the SEC win national championships, what are his other favorite TV shows to watch?
Other favorite TV shows. Currently, are you still watching Deadliest Catch? We used to watch Deadliest Catch a lot. NCIS.
Thumbs up from the commissioner.
There's a varied palette here. NCIS. And anything related to U2. The last time we talked about television, actually, he needed my login to Disney Plus to watch a U2 special because he loves. It was actually about Bones.
To say our login,
login.
That is now. Here's the 25-point bonus question, Hannah. What's his secret favorite restaurant in the SEC?
Oh, I wouldn't even know how to begin that one, and that's not even a diplomatic answer. I just don't know.
Well,
Commissioner, will you admit to one?
Yeah, well, we're a national conference, so at the top of the list would be someplace near where I am right now, Hannah. What would that be?
Oh, Doug's. Does that count?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so it's Doug's Fish Fry in Skaneateles, New York.
There we go. That's our new favorite place too. So Hannah, I know you do a lot in STEM, and I think that's very important. Talk about how rewarding that is for you, and how other meteorologists can can sort of champion that important cause also?
Sure. So I think about that in a couple of different ways. I work on a team of 6 people. One of those guys does traffic. There are 6 of us. I'm the only woman on my team. And the last team I worked on, I was the only woman. And so I just want to make sure girls know this is something that's available to you at the very basic level. You don't see me on TV every day. If this is something you find interesting, go for it. See if this is a good option for you. So I do a lot of work with women and girls in STEM just to bring awareness. I also feel really strongly that I needed help to get here. We've talked already that I didn't know you could do this for a living. I didn't go to college knowing I wanted to be a meteorologist. Someone had to look at me and say, this is an option that, given your skill set and what you're looking for, might appeal to you. So I think it's really important to use the career that I'm building to make sure that we're giving back to people, that we're saying those same things to young people now. Even just, you're 18 years old, you don't have to have your whole life figured out. Somebody said that to me, and it allowed me the freedom to make the right choice instead of the immediate choice, when I would have been an engineer and probably a little unhappy with that. So part of working in STEM fields, especially with younger people, is just my effort to make sure all the great wisdom and leadership lessons that I've learned along the way, that somebody else is getting to hear those too.
That is so wonderful, Hannah. I that message just cannot be put out there enough to everyone. And especially, I think, for women, like, we put this on ourselves to have it all figured out, and we have to have the plan. And I suffered from that so much in undergrad. I had to have this perfect plan and know how it would all fit together. And there's no way I could have found, like, I would have even guessed I could do what I do today. It didn't exist at the time. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing that you're doing a service to give them that peace of mind. And our listeners, I think, if this is something, we have a lot of younger people who listen to us too. And if this is something that is interesting to you, just, it's all about starting down that path and learning as you go and being open to change. I'm glad you were open to change from engineering. So was your skill set like, I'm really good at math and talking to people, and someone said, yeah, but actually there's a way to do that?
Yes, math and science were my loves. And actually I was really shy growing up, but then kind of came into the communication thing a little bit later and was looking for a way to combine those. And I think it's really interesting to bring up the fact about being open to change, being open to that, like, flexibility. That's so important. And I don't think everybody hears that. But also just being willing to ask for and accept help is a huge part of this. I hope that what you've heard from me tonight, and will continue to hear from me on all of my social media platforms, is just, I'm not here because of me. Like, my math and science love started this journey, but I'm here because there was a woman at the Career Center, because my parents have poured into me and have made that flexibility an option, have allowed me to keep my mind open. Another thing that Dad likes to say, keep your options open. If I've heard that once, I've heard it 4 million times. But even, like, being told that, growing up in an environment that says, keep your options open. So just, you don't have to do it by yourself. I'm sure some people can, but I'm here. I've won Emmys because there are other people involved, because I've asked for help and accepted help. And I'm 9.5 months pregnant right now, and this is a season of help. So if you hear nothing else from me, ask for and accept the help. It's a really big part of this journey.
The last possible night we got this show in. It worked out perfectly, for sure. And we can't have anyone on from Louisville and not ask them about a John Gordon story. Do you have a favorite John Gordon story for us?
Oh my goodness. A favorite John Gordon story. I just got to tell you, I just love his enthusiasm every time. So obviously I know John, we've met, like, personally. Obviously we work together through his weather service connection, but he winds up on the television a lot here. When he goes out and does a storm survey, my colleagues will interview him, and he always wears the same yellow, like, pale yellow shirt with the weather service logo. He's just so passionate. He's so enthusiastic. I just love it. But my favorite John Gordon story, gosh, I don't know. Just this past weekend, we've had a week of pretty active weather around here, and John was clearly part of warning decisions or dissemination this weekend. He was on one of those shifts, and they did a quick trigger tornado warning. He's probably going to be upset I'm telling this story, they did a quick trigger tornado warning after some Lexington Mets had been kind of pestering them, I think, in the chat service. Like, we're seeing rotation. Why is there not a warning on this? What are you guys going to do about it? They get a tornado warning on it, chased it for a little bit with a warning. And then the same Lexington Mets came back in the chat later and were like, hey, what about this other storm? Like, it kind of continued, which is fine. We all have to communicate with each other on those days. After the storms kind of settled down a little bit, John comes back in and he's like, hey, by the way, that was a big bag of nothing. Just so you know, like, we issued those warnings. We were paying attention the whole time, but also nothing happened. So just remember that for the next time you want to be slightly annoying. That was how I perceived the conversation going. He may have perceived it differently, but it felt very John, and I loved every bit of it.
Well, that's an important message right there for sure. Yeah. To communicate that. I want to lightning round the commissioner here on just a couple of things, not turning it into football brains, but we have to admire what you've done. And we have two of the three smartest people in the state of Alabama on the show tonight, and I'm not one of them. So you should run for office, Commissioner, you and Span. I think it'd be a national ticket we could sell.
I have James, so I do things. When I do things, I go full speed. So I have a collection of bobbleheads that got out of control. One of them is James Spann's. I can assure you, he does not have a bobblehead of me in his office like I have of him. So he's in the lead.
I don't know about that, but just watching the Men's College World Series recently, both teams in there, you have to be proud of this conference. Adding Texas and Oklahoma, which obviously affects a lot of folks on here. You look at these football schedules now, it's like must-see television or must-see be there for every football game now that you see Oklahoma and Texas appearing on the schedule. Troy, A&M welcome Texas into the conference, or is there some reticence there?
I don't know. I being an Aggie, there was, the way I sort of look at this is there is no real loser in a way between A&M and Texas playing again, because that's sort of a bag of money for where the game goes on. It draws quite an audience. And, when all of it kind of split along the way, at least in my opinion, there got to be some people crosswise over it, but I think we're past that. And we move toward the SEC. I think I'm excited about it.
Commissioner, the television contracts and things, what differences are we going to see in the next couple of years for SEC?
So those of you affiliated with ABC stations, so James is promoting very visibly.
Yes.
This coming season will be on CBS with our 3:30 Eastern game, as we have been for the last few decades. That will, all of our inventory will move to under the Disney heading. So our broadcast TV games will be on ABC. The great thing for us is it was really the only opportunity we had for more broadcast TV involving the Southeastern Conference, given some old contracts, and with the reduction in the number of cable households, the fracturing around digital delivery, the fact there are over 130 million national broadcast TV households is really important. So of anything, you mentioned expansion, our move to ABC. So that 3:30 game will be on an ABC affiliate beginning in the 24 season. We'll also have the ability, I hope someday we'll have a noon, a 3:30, and like a 7 p.m. kickoff, and I'm thinking on Eastern time, so that all ABC broadcasts for one day, or maybe multiple Saturdays, would be filled with the SEC. I think that's a great opportunity. And then the expansion of the college football playoff starts in 2024 to go from 4 teams to 12 is the plan right now. And I think that draws a lot more people in to the conversation in November. It's a few extra games potentially for a limited number of teams, but you think in November now, if you're not in the top 10, you're not going to be in the top 4. In the future, you could be in the top 30 and still over the last 4 or 5 weeks have a chance to be in the top 12 and participate in the playoff. And then for us, how do we continue to increase our presence around national championships and then succeed like you saw in baseball? We've spent a lot of time on the integration of Texas and Oklahoma, so that football schedule debate about 8 or 9 games. And then what happened was I was criticized because we stayed at 8, But then when people saw the 8 that everyone were playing, they're like, holy smoke, what were they even thinking about going to 9? Because as you described, every weekend has just these blockbuster matchups with these shoes brands under college football. So it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of work. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend from Oklahoma today who said, "How did Alabama get that cream puff schedule?" And I thought, "Have you looked at it?"
Yeah, really.
But when you think about Oklahoma playing Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, those are going to be fabulous games
For us, uniquely so. Among, I think, almost every other conference expansion, we've restored rivalries. So you spoke of Texas A&M and Texas meeting in College Station in 24, but Arkansas and Texas is legendary. Hannah was born in Texas. We lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, actually in Allen, Texas, when she was born. And you watched the Arkansas fans under the Southwest Conference make the basketball pilgrimage to Reunion Arena back in the day when Nolan Richardson was coaching. And so you've restored those rivalries. Oklahoma, Missouri, we're a quarter of the Big 8. Imagine if 30 years ago we would have said, 1/4 of the Big 8 membership will reside in the SEC, probably would have seemed unimaginable. But now we've got this really special southeastern quadrant footprint, a little bit of southwestern spillover, but it's great flavor, great competition, and our student athletes are really excited about what lies ahead.
So, Commissioner, NIL, how are we doing on that? How does it change in coming years?
It's been an environment of constant change. So this July 1st was the 2nd year anniversary of the first state laws going into effect. And I would not give us anything more than a C, if you will, nationally for implementation. We have warned about the problems created with state by state legislation, where you're asking high school recruits to figure out maybe 38 different state laws. The states are competitors, and so they change their laws. And it's a bit of a race to the bottom, if you will, or how can we deregulate and then restrict anyone from overseeing our own laws? And since the state laws have been in effect, I'm not aware of any state that's had any oversight or enforcement action within its own state laws. And now the states are starting, and it just happened in New York, was the most recent state to say, well, nobody else can regulate us either. Nobody else can come in and investigate and hold accountable our universities. And that relates to conferences and the NCAA. And there are historic reasons for that. But what we need is a national standard. Our student athletes are asking for that. We just had about 70 of our leaders from our teams across our 14 campuses in Birmingham. And they've been very clear that having a state-by-state standard is not fair to them if they're playing. They want to line up against somebody subject to similar standards. And it's really not fair to those who will follow, trying to figure out where to go to college. Who do I want my coach? Am I going to play sports in college? What's my major? We've talked about those challenges. And, oh, yeah, I have to figure out maybe, again, 38 different state laws and how they might apply to me, not to mention these offers that are coming at me at warp speed at a time in my life when I may not have all the information and perspective I need to make the best decision. So we've got a lot of opportunity to improve. And I think the reason to improve is to support young people and their educational endeavors, their economic endeavors, and their athletic endeavors.
So I got a question
James,
for both.
before you say anything, I want to say something
Okay.
that just recalled from our National Tourism Lunch. My favorite question in the QA session, Commissioner, was the man who stood up and said, "Will you ever bring the SEC football championship back to Birmingham?" And you just looked at him and said, "No." And I just cracked up. So that was pretty funny.
That's a correct recitation.
So for both of you, a meteorologist and the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, you attract trolls. It's the nature of the beast, critics. And it can be
His
brutal.
tires get slashed, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. So the question for both of you, Hannah, I'll start with you. How do you handle the trolls? And it's so hard for young women. We did an episode here, and my eyes were opened, and I worked with incredible young woman, Taylor. And how do you handle it? What's some tips on handling the vitriol that comes with being a meteorologist?
Wow. There are not enough hours in the day. I was really fortunate that at Mississippi State, during my education, they prepared me that that was a reality of this industry. I'm so thankful for that. And that's why I don't use my dad's last name on television. I was not married when I first started this business. I adopted a television name because we talked about all of that, the scariness involved with some of this. I've received death threats, threats of violence, a whole slew of things that we don't even need to go into here. So in terms of like tips, I just had one actually last week. A woman was upset that I'm very pregnant on television and she didn't want to have to watch that, I guess. So I posted it. I think it was a learning moment. And my dad texted me. That was so nice. This is a thing that we both deal with, that we're both trying to navigate. Dad does it better and differently, I think, than I do. But the fact that I got my first broadcast meteorology job literally the same day as his press conference announcing he was commissioner has been a fascinating journey for the two of us to walk together, because we're navigating all of these new challenges together. They're not always the same challenges. I didn't have to save the world during COVID, the football world. But, you know, especially when it comes to feedback on social media, I try not to characterize negative or positive people based on the terrible things they say. It's been really interesting to walk that road with my dad. So a couple of quick things that I've learned along the way. First of all, it's easier said than done, but just not taking it personally. These people don't know me as a human. They see a person on television and that's who they're directing this at. And again, that's easier said than done. But this woman from last week wanted me to know that she thought I was an idiot and was very fat. And I just don't care. That doesn't affect me because she doesn't. It's the ones that, you know, feel a little bit more personal that are harder to manage. I see a counselor actually because of some of the terrible things that I have received online, pictures and again, death threats and all the things. And so it really helps me to talk to a professional who can help me put that in context and can help me think of really healthy ways to respond and non-healthy ways. I used to screenshot and share almost everything that I thought was negative or that a troll would post. I don't know that that's helpful for me anymore, but I still do it sometimes. Last week is a great example. I try to use them as like learning moments. If this is just a dumb comment from somebody that happens to have a keyboard in front of them, I don't need to entertain that today. My personal philosophy is if this is like a bad weather take, if this is something that somebody else could learn from, that's really the only time I share it anymore, is to try to make it a learning moment. It's hard, man. That's the hardest part of this business, to be honest, is just the terrible comments you get, whether about the weather, my intelligence level, how I look today. It's just, I don't have a good answer for it, but you just got to keep going. Dress, yeah.
It's
anything.
Send those bad ones to Span. He'll shame them with his 5 million followers.
No. And listen, and my deal is I learn from others like you. That's why I'm asking both of you, because I like to learn from others. I think Ginger Z does a really good job with it. There's an odd combination of sass and grace you got to have. And listen, I'm from rural South Alabama. You learn how to stand up a bully, and that's always going to be deep down inside of me. But sometimes you need to allow for grace, understanding there's something going on here in their lives or they have mental health issues, but it is brutal. And so, Greg, let me toss it over to you.
Yeah.
The junk you get has got to be horrible.
Yeah. In fact, I was named commissioner publicly on a Thursday, and on Friday it started around officiating at our men's basketball tournament that I was somehow responsible for. And I've actually started engaging a new service that looks at really security threats, pretty high level group. And I've learned a lot this summer. I heard the leader of the group speak, and then to find out that I'm on some of these really, really out there social media channels tied to conspiracy theories. I've joked that on an annual basis, I'm paid a lot. On an hourly basis, not so much, but on a death threat basis, it's really not a good deal. And it's kind of a laughable moment. And when we have things that are at a level of seriousness, they're not that many, but you know, we turn those over to law enforcement. I have all of my filters on my Twitter account, so I'm effectively the only conference commissioner who's as visible and active on social media. we debated that way back in 2015, and it was a way to personalize myself. So if you follow my Twitter account, I'm right now in my summer reading phase, posting about the books I've read. I just read a book on Jim Thorpe that was fascinating. And I didn't go really in depth on what I read in quotes, but that's part of my shtick. It's moved from nachos and the number of marching tubas and a high school band, which was my Friday night ritual for years when Hannah and her sister were in high school, to, it is about the conference. It's about who I am, what I read, more so than just, hey, we won, but there's some, hey, we won in there as well. And having my filters on has been a great thing for my mental health, because the attacks, it's hard to ignore them. Let's be honest. I mean, James, you've been at it for a long time. You look at that stuff. I had one today that stuck through, where you're like, man, somebody's not in a healthy place, and it's not me. And there is a moment to react. Like in baseball, somebody's tweeting about we should be playing in a dome, and I hopefully grace and sass, but it kind of blew up on the person who sent that. As a father, I've been shocked at what Hannah's told me. She hasn't. My children are great at protecting their parents, but why someone would treat another person's daughter or wife or soon-to-be mother with a kind of vitriol on social media over a 15% chance of rain or a 50% chance of rain, or share opinions on what they wear, it is nonsensical in the friendliest way I can say it, sickening and disheartening. And actually, I think some of this activity, whether it's coaches, student athletes, commissioners, meteorologists, it drives really good people out of the work. If we're not careful, really good people. And so the pivot is, you can be a horse's behind to a really good person on social media. And then if it's weather and you move them out of the business because it's harmful to them, then you have a substandard individual delivering really important information like we talked about. And the last thing I'll add is, before I respond to someone, I usually check their followers. And what I want to say is, well, I would elevate you and your 80 followers, but I don't think I need to do that with my social media following. And lastly, I usually have another adult review my most of my tweets before I send them, and I get talked off the ledge.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I do that as well.
why, it's like, what, I know what kind of world we live in. I don't have any aspirations of fantasy land and how people treat each other. But the notion that one would take the time to use their thumbs on their Android or their iPhone to say some of the things, or post and send some of the things, there are some people who are actually screaming for help from people like you, who are build trust and can communicate. And yep, they're going to flip out every so often, but what they're actually saying in that moment, I think, is, I need you a lot more than I realize.
That's very true. And Steve Shaw is one of my neighbors, and goodness gracious, the stuff he's seen. And for those that don't know, he headed the officiating for the Southeastern Conference. He's been with the NCAA for how many years now?
Four. This will be his fourth season. The voicemails too. Steve can tell you some stories. I mean, the voicemails we get. The most legendary one is when Jamarcus Russell played at LSU. Somebody called in about midnight and says, I've got good information that Jamarcus Russell is a cyborg. So you're trying to think about somebody who would dial your phone number, go through our voicemail to leave in our officiating voicemail box. That allegation is pretty remarkable.
Hannah, I've not answered my phone here since 1998. Okay, I mean that the last time I answered, I got a phone message, Commissioner. It was we had a horrible tornado, April 8th, 1998. This was an F5. 34 people died. And we'd been on TV for hours and hours and hours, and they wanted me to fly in the helicopter at the first light of day. And I had to wind down, and I thought I'd do something normal. And I made a horrible decision. I thought I'd check my voicemail. First lady on that thing chewed me out. I mean, this woman, she sounded like she's about 70 years old. I mean, she was dropping F-bombs. This woman could cuss the horns off a bull. Then she started talking ugly about my mama, and she was mad because General Hospital was cut off at 2:30 in the afternoon. And I said, I will never, ever, ever, ever answer that phone again. And I've honored that commitment since April 8, 1998. I don't know where my phone is. I don't know how to get voicemail, and I don't want to. So if you're going to hate on me, you got to hate on me on the Twitter. So real quick, and I know that we've kept you, both of you, for much longer than we said, but thank you all for being here. But the question I want to ask Greg, how long you want to do this? You know, I was on Nick's show, and we started talking about this, and it kind of gets on his nerves, and it kind of gets on my nerves, because people ask us this all the time. When are you going to retire, Coach? Span, when are you going to retire? We're just getting started. What do you mean? I mean, I literally feel better now than I felt when I was 25 years old. And I think Coach Saban feels the same way. And as long as we can contribute in a positive way to what we're doing, is we have cognition that is strong, and mentally and physically we're good. We're just getting started. So how about you?
It's probably a little bit different for me. So I took over when I was 50 as commissioner, and I was asked in that first press conference, and I went right till I was 65. So 15 years, if you look at my predecessors, would be a pretty good run. So I'm now in year 9. And I'm not looking at the horizon. I do think that part of my reality is I was asked about name, image, and likeness. And I've had opportunities to work in some level of professional sports. I've never pursued those because I wanted to work in an educational setting where you're having life impacting moments with young people. It's not about generational wealth. It's about generational opportunity. And I think it's fascinating to watch the economic opportunities being created. And for me, the challenge is to work through the problems we have right now. And I would argue we are facing decades of neglect of key issues. So the fact that states introduced name, image, and likeness, that didn't just happen in 2019 and 2020. That happened because we were so slow to adapt, maybe some complacency. And a friendly way to say it is, you know what, the system worked, but didn't work for everybody the same way. And that's where we're criticized. So how do we adapt? Is part of what gets me up and causes me to think. Now, what I don't have is time to just spend on big picture solutions, because every day there's something to deal with. And for me, I don't have a horizon, but we have to have a really collaborative effort among, I think, certainly the 5 conferences. I think the people in Division I outside the big conferences have to change their thinking. We have a new NCAA president that's been refreshing. The NCAA national office has to change its thinking. And the fact that we're going to Congress, you know, I heard actually an audio from Ronald Reagan that, like, the 9 words you never want to hear is, "I'm from the government, I'm here to help." So I don't go to Congress asking for a uniform standard for college athletics lightly, because of those words. But that's where we are, because of litigation, state legislation, new expectations upon us, and the effort to support student athletes without always producing a lawsuit. Those realities I want to work through, and those are energizing. But if we finally just give up and say, well, we're just going to make some decisions around professionalization that I think would draw away from generational opportunity, the kind of growth pattern we see in college. I think it's threatened right now because of transfers and the name, image, and likeness inducements around those. That'll be a moment where I'll have to take a step back and think about, what does I want? Do I want to go back and earn my meteorology degree or something like that?
You couldn't hack it.
The differential equations and atmospheric physics would have been a filtering point for me.
Hannah, if you talked to your dad about maybe setting up a transfer portal for television meteorologists, so we can get in the portal, that's an interesting concept. But Hannah, real quick, and again, I know that, are you on the air tomorrow morning, by the way?
Not until lunchtime tomorrow. I'm good.
Okay.
We talk all
good.
night.
Good. I hate, so a lot of times we have those that have to work the morning shift on this show at night, and I feel bad because
Oh, man.
I want to keep them up all night.
Checking to see if Hannah's mom's still awake while watching.
yeah.
Okay.
So Greg has talked about how things are changing in college athletics with the NIL. It's complicated. Things are changing in our business, how people consume weather. Your generation will probably not use these Ron Burgundy newscasts that we're still doing. Where do you see the future here? And let me just say this too, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I love your generation. I think you're brilliant. You're hardworking. You're going to come up with something that is so good. But where do you think this is all going for television meteorologists in 10 years and 20 years? What's going on here?
Well, I think if I knew that, I'd be making a lot more money and be doing something a little different. But in all seriousness, this idea of just being open to change and being flexible with what the new form of media is, that's critical. That's the piece right now, because when I first started in this business, you had to have a professional Facebook page. Twitter was sort of optional. I mean, Twitter existed, don't get me wrong, but did you have to have a work Twitter? Not everybody felt super strongly about that, but you had to be on Facebook. And now look where we are. We never could have imagined TikTok. We certainly could not have imagined this new Threads situation and what Twitter would have become in just that short amount of time. I got my first job. The thing that set me apart from the other candidate who was the finalist was that I was doing essentially what are now Reels on Instagram, or the TikTok version of it, but posting videos on the Instagram feed that had some forecast information and some graphics. And so to think creatively about digital media in general, I think that's the sweet spot. It's what are we doing off of television that is unique and that reaches people where they are? I mean, we're on YouTube tonight. My station was a little bit late to the YouTube situation, but we know people are on YouTube. We know they're coming here to look for information. We know people, especially in the younger generation, are going to TikTok to look for information, and it's there, but it's not good information. I was listening to a talk, I don't remember when this was. I think it was at Mississippi State this year. The students put on a symposium every year in March, which is fabulous, and I got to go this year. And there was a conversation about people will find information. If someone goes looking for weather information, they will find it. But if it's wrong or not good, then it's not helpful. So the responsibility of the forecaster or the meteorologist is just don't create a vacuum. Put as much information out there as you can on as many platforms as you can. We don't have unlimited time. So you have to leverage what makes the most sense and what's going to be the best use of your time and resources, but don't let the vacuum create itself, because then people are going to find bad information. And then you're going to have those people say, well, but last time you were wrong, or, oh, but the forecast was so terrible, I can't make decisions based off that. And then they ignore it for the rest of forever. So where are we going in 20 years? I don't know. Where were we 20 years ago? I mean, who could have predicted where we would be now? But my best piece of advice for everyone, especially young people who have come up in a generation where they get their weather information from Twitter and from TikTok, is you've just got to keep your mind open, keep your ears open. I mean, James, you're exceptional at this, about being on the leading edge of new platforms and just understanding what's out there and if that's going to be beneficial or not. You've got to keep your ears open for that kind of stuff and know when to pivot. If you got to cut your losses on a platform to move on to something different, that's important as well.
Outstanding advice. Outstanding. And Kim, I got to bring you in here. So you know where Hannah is in her pregnancy. Any advice from a seasoned professional?
Yeah, bless this crew. They have been with me through, I've been a panelist on this show for 5 years. That is 3 pregnancies, 3 children. They are wonderful. And I think as much as you have tried to tell other people to have grace for themselves in the journey, have grace for yourself in this journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is definitely a journey. I'm excited for you. Are you due? Like, do you have a date? Did we get you on like the last day? We could have gotten like you're kind of close.
I have about 2 weeks left till the due date. We'll see how long I keep working. I mean, I just came off a week of morning shifts, severe weather every day. Well, 6 of the last 7 days I was working were severe weather, solo coverage for the most part. And it kicked my butt, I'll be super honest. So we were having some conversations today about what work looks like for the next couple of weeks. And so that message about some grace with yourself is well timed, Kim. Thank you.
Oh, good. And congratulations for pushing through and representing like pregnant women in scientific spaces, because I think that needs to just be seen. And you have this amazing opportunity. As much as you're showing up, for girls in your just day-to-day job, you're also showing them you can do anything at any point. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you're disabled. And there is this idea in society that women were taken out of the workforce only one generation ago. I mean, it is a recent change. So you're still paving ground by doing that. So well done. If you need to hear a positive, that one crazy lady can trust whatever is going on with her. There are just thousands of people who see you, and you're making that huge difference in their lives and what they think is possible for themselves. So hats off to you, and congratulations in advance.
Thank you. My husband was watching the live stream earlier. I think he maybe had to go back to work, but he will be glad that you said all of those things, because he just gave me a lecture like that this weekend. Quickly, I realized as we were kind of talking about some of these decisions, my husband and I, that I've just never worked with a pregnant woman before. That's not been my experience, because I don't work with a lot of women. I work in a male-dominated industry. So I've never seen someone say, physically, I cannot do this tomorrow. Or, that really kicked my butt. I'm going to need to go sit down for 10 minutes. I don't know what that looks like. And so it's been really hard for me to understand how to have some conversations like that, or what that should look like in a workplace. And so I'm super fortunate for the guys on my team to be willing to have those conversations with me and to cover my weaknesses where those are starting to show up now. The news director I work for is a woman and a mother, and she has been super instrumental in that as well. So I'm super thankful for the people in my life.
So I've been sitting back. I just really enjoy the show. It's been really neat for me to watch Hannah and Commissioner, just your father-daughter relationship, and you can just see how much Hannah respects you, and she's already thrown out some of the advice that you've given. And I think about my dad. I lost my dad, it'll be 10 years ago in 2024. And I was very close to him, but we battled quite a bit because I am exactly like him. And one thing is that he would always give me free advice. And I got to the point where I asked him to stop giving me free advice because I was tired of hearing it. But I'll tell you what, he started sneaking some back in. I could really use some free advice right now with some of the things going on in my life with business and all that. So thinking about that, Hannah, what is some of the best advice that your dad has given you that you will just take with you forever and that you will pass off to your kids?
Wow, that's profound. There has been so much.
Do I need to leave?
No, you're gonna listen.
Permission to speak freely.
Man, I just have, like, the Greg Sankey that the world is getting to know now, I have grown up with that person, and it's such a gift. This is, again, like I said before, one of the preeminent leaders, especially in college sports, but I'll argue in the country right now. And I got to grow up seeing that. He's been this person, aside from making weird dad jokes at home, but he's been this person. And you're welcome for not elaborating on that, but he's been this person my whole life. And so to distill his, the life lessons or the big things I've learned from him is so challenging. I think, though, you make a really interesting point about how our relationship has evolved through the years, and especially in thinking about your dad. So I'm about to become a mom. I have no idea what that looks like, but I know that I have great parents who I can ask questions of and fall back on. But something that my parents were really intentional about is that as I grew up, and my sister too, they really wanted to transition their role from being like the person who has to make decisions for their kid to being advisors, and now to just sort of being a support network. So my parents are really great about offering advice when I ask for it, or when they see like an urgent and significant need, but letting my sister and I manage our own lives and come to them when we need them or when we want them, which is beautiful. Being able to come to these people who sustained you and kept you alive now when you want and need them in life is just such a gift. So that's one of the biggest life lessons as I think about parenthood, is just being really intentional with how your relationship and your roles are changing, really the role of being a parent as your kid gets older and progresses through life. Leadership in particular, the number one lesson that I have learned from Greg Sankey is that knowledge is power. He reads so much. And I think that's a huge key to his success, is that he is a sponge. He soaks up information. He soaks up perspective. That's a huge part of why he leads so well, I think, is because he solicits a wide range of perspective. So he's not necessarily looking for everybody's opinion on everything, but he wants to hear your experience and how knowing what you've experienced and your perspective on a situation is different than his. That allows him to make different decisions that are more well-rounded. That's a huge part of being a good leader, is being a good listener, being open to those perspectives. Again, not necessarily allowing everyone to the decision-making table where that's not appropriate, but being open to somebody has experienced this differently than I have, and that's just as valid as my experience. I think that's a huge piece of leading well. I think those are my two takeaways that I'll leave you guys with. The parenting thing and the leadership thing are huge things I've learned from Dad.
Well, what you have explained to us, Hannah, is your dad, and I think you, and I wish more people could be good critical thinkers. I talk about that a lot. People on this show won't be surprised by my response, but that's our problem, is the shortage of people in this country, particularly people in leadership positions. I'm not going to say political. Oops.
Go ahead.
That they are not critical thinkers. So
they used to teach that when I was in high school.
I know,
they don't teach that anymore.
They don't. And it's really a shame. We better we better get that straightened out, by the way.
Yeah. We got to take a very quick break, but real quickly, Hannah, what position did you play in softball?
I was a really good runner. So I wound up in the
middle
outfield
infielder? Outfielder,
okay. In the outfield a lot.
So Greg, what was it like sitting in the stands watching her play softball at Briarwood?
I'm a competitive guy, so there's it was a lot of fun, actually. And you forget, like, going down, if you live in Birmingham, 280 from our office in downtown, trying to get to a 4 p.m. high school softball game, how much stress that brought. So the rest of it wasn't that stressful. Having teammates ride home with us who may have been nauseous and telling them to keep it minty.
I was just thinking about that the
other day. think minty thoughts so that one doesn't become ill. Gardendale had the best nachos of any softball field. Those memories. And
this is good information.
It is.
Yeah. They played in the state tournament. She was a good teammate, which was always important to me. He had Burl Kynard, who was the superintendent of Briarwood for a long time, became the first base coach. And I could sit at that time and listen to him all day because he had the most precise use of the English language among anybody that I've ever met. And it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'll tell one quick softball story. So again, our son played baseball at Spain Park, and we gave a ride. And by the way, the odors coming out of those boys, it was nasty. What they do in baseball, after a baseball game, they spray themselves down with Axe, and they think it's love nectar, like all the girls are going to love it. In reality, it smells like a sewage treatment plant. It's a cesspool.
Yes.
But Hannah, we gave some girls a ride home after they were playing softball, we're playing baseball, and one of those girls opened her bag. It was like something had died in that thing. I said, and immediately she said, "Oh, it's just my shoes. Like, it's no big deal." I mean, somehow that sweet young woman emitted more of an odor out of that bag than those guys with Axe and body odor. I mean, so maybe that's just a local issue there at Spain Park. I don't know. But anyway,
move on.
This is way too much information. We got to take a very quick break, and we're going to wrap up the show after Tony Rice. Jen is going to take the week off from both email and This Week in Tornado History. So we're going to go to Tony Rice very quickly for his astronomy report. We'll come back with picks of the week and wrap it up as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
July's full moon is a supermoon, the first of 4. Supermoons are a little bigger and noticeably brighter, especially at moonrise and moonset, because they are full moons occurring when the moon is near its closest point to Earth. This point in its less than circular orbit is called perigee. The full moons on August 1st, August 30th, and September 29th of this year also earn that super label. And since August 30th's full moon is the second in a calendar month, it's likely going to get the super blue moon label. More on exactly how rare that is in a few weeks. You might not see July on every list of 2023 supermoons. That's because it only fits one of the 5 most commonly used definitions. That's right, there are 5 definitions for supermoon. Each tries to capture full moons that are happening close to perigee, and they generally overlap, but each has its own spin on the rules. Why 5 and not one standard? Because supermoon isn't a term that you're going to find in astronomy textbooks. It's a popular one, originally coined by astrologer Richard Knoll back in 1979 in one of those horoscope magazines that can still be found at supermarket checkouts. Knoll was using some very scientific calculations of the lunar phase and distance to make some very unscientific predictions about things like earthquakes. For the record, July's moon is super by the definition created by now retired NASA astrophysicist Fred Espernek, who's best known for his touchstone calculations on lunar and solar eclipses. His definition calls any full moon super if it occurs, quote, within 90% of its closest approach to Earth in a given orbit, unquote. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTD Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, let's do picks of the week here. We'll do these very quickly and we'll wrap things up. Everybody, we're going to go around the horn. Somebody's going to share something that's cool, weather related, close to being weather related. And we'll post all of this up on weatherbrains.com. And let's go to James Adelot, who's got to do the 9 o'clock news in Tulsa. So we'll get him done first. James, go.
You bet. Mine is the Sprite Fest that Paul Smith ran into again just a couple of nights ago. Just incredible pictures. I don't want to pay for a camera that can take pictures of sprites, but he has. It's amazing.
It really is. I mean, his feeds are just absolutely incredible. And we've had him on the show. I forget the episode number, but fascinating listen. And I think Pecos Hank was on that episode too. Yeah. All right, Kim, let's go to you. And I know you're still trying to get everybody to bed here.
I am. We're doing the wrangling. So appreciate us wrapping soon. I'm going to, based on our conversation about complacency, I want to share an article Julie Demuth led with some co-authors where they look at complacency, that idea in warning response, and sort of look at the social science research we do. Do we see that people are complacent? Sort of questioning that. There are other ways to think about it, including, sometimes people are just doing what's individually rational for them and they are attentive, but just don't make the decisions we think they ought to make. And so there's a real question there about under whose authority, who should be making those choices. So it's an interesting conversation piece, and we'll be posting it on the website.
Can't wait to see it. Great pick. All right, Jen, what you got for us? Go.
So my pick is an article about the Penn State weather world and Penn State's campus weather. And it reminds me of our show back in January. We had some amazing folks on that span the decades from my alma mater. And it just does an overview of the forecasting there and all the outreach that they do through campus weather.
Excellent. Again, all these picks will be up on weatherbrains.com. Troy, go. What you got?
If you've been with the show for a while, you know that occasionally I'll refer. It's really a great publication. They do a great job. It's online, Cowboy State Daily out of Wyoming. A number of good articles. But back on the 28th of June, did an article regard to a pro rodeo cowboy on his horse. He's from Nebraska, rope in hand, and lightning struck and killed him. And it's really kind of an interesting story. There were some discussions between myself and some of our colleagues here on WeatherBrains about some of the quotes that were used in that story, like, oh, we've done that before, and lightning was striking the other part of the arena, and we didn't think there was anything wrong, and that causes some problems. But it was kind of an interesting article. Cowboy State Daily, 28th day of June. Unfortunate story, but an interesting one.
Awesome. All right. So, Hannah, we've stalled long enough. Give us a pick. Go.
I clearly like the intersection of weather and sports. So the thing that caught my attention today was F1. Formula One racing is in England this week. The British Grand Prix is this weekend. There were some climate protesters who got onto the track and were causing a disturbance. And one of the drivers mouthed off a little bit about wanting them removed and being a safety issue. So the two sides of that were fascinating to me.
Okay, good deal. We'll and again, my pick, it's the 1983 Iron Bowl, the live ABC coverage. You really ought to watch that. Rotating wall clouds, severe storm, lightning, tornado warning. kept on playing.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner, tell us something good. Tell us a pick. Go.
I'm beside a lake in the Finger Lakes region of New York, and while we've been here, it's gone from sunlight to dark. Before the sun went down, there was a float plane teasing me because my hobby is to run out and take videos of the float plane. We've not seen it yet since we've been up here a couple of times, and it just was outside the window, and I could send you video from the last time I saw the float plane, but it's a pretty cool thing to watch this close. And he flew actually like right in front of our part of the shoreline just to tease me that he was so close for a picture, and I was on with all of you and missed it. So pretty cool to see that happen.
Way too cool. All right. Well, listen, Greg, thank you so much for your time. I know that you're very busy and you're trying to get off the grid up there. You're about to get really busy. But when's the first SEC football game? How close are we?
Actually, Hawaii's at Vanderbilt. I think it's August 26th. So it's what we call week 0, the week before Labor Day weekend. And then we'll have a game Thursday night of week 1, a couple big games that Saturday. I'm going to be in Nashville. Virginia's playing Tennessee at Nissan Stadium, and then we'll head to Charlotte quickly for South Carolina, North Carolina, and then LSU and Florida State on Sunday before Labor Day. So it'll be here before I'm ready, before we know it. And I thoroughly enjoy the first week of football, and then it's a bit of a grind.
I understand, but thanks for your leadership. Hannah, promote whatever you want to plug here. Go plug away. Social media, threads, anything you want to promote here. Go.
Your website,
Sure.
Hannah?
I do have a website, strongweather.com, where I archive all those videos we talked about before. It's pretty dormant aside from that. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for now. We'll see where that takes me next. But Hannah Strong, or a variation of Weather Strong, and show up, connect. I'd love it.
All right. When the baby comes, send some pictures. Okay.
Will do.
So we've got to wrap this thing up here. So again, it's been a really good show. This has been great tonight. But if you want to get in touch with us, if you have any questions for us, the email address here, it's email@weatherbrains.com. If you're new here, we typically do the show Monday nights. This is a Wednesday night special because of the 4th of July. We're typically live Monday nights at 7 Central, 8 Eastern on our YouTube channel, WeatherBrains, but most of you listen. We know that, and the podcast will be hitting a little later tonight. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks. This was a great show.
Thank
you both.
Hope that was helpful.
It really means a
Thanks,
lot.
everybody.
Thank y'all.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
I still think RainCon needs a higher profile.
Be our show title.
We'll allow RainCon, James.
If there's a TourCon, there should be a RainCon.
Yeah.
That is true. We could make that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. You'll have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.